Good evening. My name is John H., and I'm an alcoholic. In this Code Blue Big Book Action Seminar, we're going to go through the recovery section of the Big Book line by line. We are going to take the action that our founders and the first 100 people who recovered say that we must do to overcome this seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. Now, I don't claim to be any kind of a big book and 12-step guru or expert, not by any means. I am no kind of deep spiritual advisor. I'm just a simple drunk who was almost dead from the disease when a couple of recovered alcoholics reached out their hand to me and said, "We have a different way." Now, this is based on the Canadian method pioneered by the Golden Slippers, but I also borrow heavily from the Joe and Charlie Big Book Weekend tapes, from Chuck C., from Clancy, and from all of the giants upon whose shoulders we are riding. Now, I would love it if you could grab a couple of friends and listen to these sessions together, because working the steps with other people is always more powerful than trying to go through them alone. So you're going to need a large print big book, a highlighter, and a pen, and some willingness. And as you guys will see, we open every session with a set-aside prayer to more open our mind to be more receptive to this information. Thank you so much for listening. Good evening, everybody. I'm John, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, John.
All right, we got a lot to cover today, so I'm just going to read the end of my usual blurb here. About Max C. We recover in AA by taking the steps, and if we don't take the action as described in our basic textbook, we might not recover. These study and action sessions will guide you through the steps precisely as the first 100 men and women laid them down. These are back to the basic sessions, accepting the simple kit of spiritual tools that's been laid at our feet. Let's open with a set-aside prayer. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about sobriety, life, and you, so that I may be open to a new experience. Peace. Oh, yeah. Welcome, everybody. I'll take that back. And this is our final session. So 16 weeks went kind of fast, didn't it? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do a vision for you today, which is the last chapter before the story section. I want to start out by saying I've got a couple of flyers here that I put on the desk. Basically, these are Code Blue flyers, and I used to have two of them. You know, the one that says, "Are you a chronic relapser?" That was the one. I was 6 months sober, and I was at a meeting in New Hope, and I was about ready to drink again when somebody said, this Code Blue thing is for chronic relapsers, and that got my attention. It really did. And I listened to the fella, and he kind of described what was going on with me, and I decided I was going to sign up for it. But other people, I usually have another one too, which doesn't start out by saying, "Are you a chronic relapser?" It says, "Journey through the first 164 pages with me." So I usually have 2 or 3 of these because we kind of want to cater these to the people we're trying to reach. Some of us are offended, when we say, "Are you a chronic relapser?" and that might turn them off. So, but grab a couple of these, and I've got more out there. I'm starting another session on June 13th. And any of you guys, the syllabus is the same. If you missed a session and you want to sit through it, you're welcome to come. I went through, when I went through my first one, I got something that I had been missing my whole life, which was spirituality and fellowship. And they were doing another one immediately after, and I went through it again. They were doing a third one a couple weeks after that, and I went through it again. And, the 4th time they had me start to read and greet and stuff. And then the 5th time I started doing it with a group of people. And then I think the 6th time I was doing it and everybody bailed. So I finished it myself. And I've been doing them ever since. And I just love doing it because every time I go through the book, I see different things. And that's why I love sponsoring people as well. Because, every time I go through the book and I do the steps myself, it has new meaning for me. And it helps me to grow spiritually and to stay on the right path. So by all means, one of these is about the online sessions, and the other is about the session starting on June 13th. So anybody you know that haven't called me, it's actually starting to fill up. So they got to call me and get signed up if they want to do it. So I'm going to start out today, before we start reading A Vision for You. I'm gonna go over maybe 20 minutes of notes. We might go 5 or 10 minutes over today, but no more than that. So, a lot of people think that the book Alcoholics Anonymous is out of date. I mean, I hear this from people that are both new to sobriety and veterans. They say, it's ridiculous that the book has no meaning in today's world. And, I say it absolutely has all the meaning, because alcohol hasn't changed. The bottles have changed, the labels, the tastes, but alcohol itself hasn't changed. Alcoholics haven't changed. We're still getting drunk. We're still crashing cars. We're still getting divorced. We're still dying. We're still spreading misery to everybody. So alcoholics have not changed either. And we still have the obsession and the allergy that we've had for thousands of years. And human nature never changes. I don't care, you go back to the ancient Romans, you go back, human nature is always the same, and that's why this book works just as well today as it worked when it first came off the press. I'm going to read a little bit of an article from the Star Tribune paper, and this was Tuesday, October 25th, 2016. I think I read that before I was going to do one of these sessions. Gerald Mose stayed sober for nearly 3 decades. But 6 months after he fell off the wagon, his final binge ended in tragedy. On a September night 2 years ago, Mose hit 4 bars and downed at least 21 drinks in 7 hours before driving a car down the wrong way of a divided highway in Rochester, where he hit another car head-on, killing a 9-year-old boy and paralyzing the boy's 7-year-old cousin. So here's a guy that was bone dry for 30 years. Does that remind you of anything? That reminds me of the man of 30 in the book. The man of 30 was bone dry for 25 years. He started drinking and he couldn't stop, and he was dead in 4 years. Right? So I think one of the things that we've learned is that we have a deadly disease and we have a progressive disease. Right? Our disease progresses whether we're drinking or not. You can be bone dry for 25 years, and once you start drinking, I mean, it's like you never stopped, and it's like the disease has progressed on, and you're going to be in worse shape than in no time that you can imagine. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Some of us think that after a long time of sobriety, we can safely drink, right? Well, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, whether we're drinking or not. And I think what we've learned from the book and this program is that we need a power in our life, right? A power greater than ourselves, and that power is God. And, people say, I had one guy say, you can't talk about God, John. You're going to scare people. They're going to run away. And, and I say, well, you know what, man? Our book talks about God. This whole program is about spirituality. And if I don't talk about God, I'm going to be lying to people, and I'm not going to do that. Step 12 is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, right? Not as the result of 90 meetings in 90 days. However, I'm not saying meetings aren't important. They're vitally important, because the meetings are going to support us while we do the work and apply the first 11 steps to our lives to the best of our ability. Right? And our book guarantees us that if we apply the first steps to our lives just to the best of our ability, we're never going to do it perfectly. It says we're going to wake up spiritually. Right? And AA is about taking actions. It's about the way you behave on the outside. And my experience tells me that people who have woken up spiritually are no longer thirsty. That was true, and I'm not a spiritual guru at all. I'm aware of spiritual things now. I'm aware that I should be out there helping people. I'm aware that I should be treating people with dignity and respect. I'm aware that I should be asking God for help, and I mean that's all it is. And because I'm aware of that, I think that my thirst for alcohol has been removed from me. Now, people discovered that they could stop drinking by going to a lot of meetings instead of working the steps, right? The first 100 people did not have that. But once there's all these meetings everywhere, people discovered they could stay sober just by going to meetings. And these people, in order to defend themselves, they started measuring success in these rooms by the number of days, weeks, or months that they've gone without taking a drink, rather than by the quality of the way they're living their life. And when you do that, you are selling yourself so short when you do that. Real quick, again, where did the steps come from? Well, step one came from a little doctor named Dr. Silkworth, who treated 50,000 alcoholics at the Towns Hospital in New York. Dr. Silkworth came up with the obsession and the allergy. The allergy is, once I start drinking, I can't control what I take, and I usually get drunk. The obsession is, even when I try to quit drinking, from time to time, an idea in my mind is going to overcome all ideas to the contrary, and it's going to tell me that it's okay to take that first drink. Once I take that first drink, I can't control what I take, and I get drunk all over again. So that came from a non-alcoholic doctor. Step two, right, the idea of the vital spiritual experience, that came from a psychiatrist on the other side of the world. Dr. Carl Jung, he had a patient, and the patient was a hopeless alcoholic, and Dr. Jung said, you would better go find a vital spiritual experience or you're going to die. He just told him, he said, there's nothing I can do for you. So step two came from a non-alcoholic psychiatrist. Steps 3 through 11 came from a group of non-alcoholic people called the Oxford Group. And they were practicing first century Christianity. So I think God must have got tired of seeing all of us alcoholics die, and he gelled all of this in the mind of an alcoholic mooch by the name of Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson. I came into these rooms, I was restless, I was irritable, I was discontented, I was full of guilt, shame, and remorse. I could not stop using. I was running on selfishness and self-centeredness. I didn't give a damn about anybody else. I didn't give a damn about me. As I was supported by the meetings, right, by the fellowship, I applied the steps to my life under the guidance of a sponsor by going through the first 164 pages with them, and I was transformed into somebody who has some peace of mind, some serenity, and some happiness, and the willingness to help other people. Now, that's an entire change in the way I think. That's an entire change in the way I act. I've never felt love, patience, tolerance, compassion, and goodwill till now. Many of us have, but I haven't. I've never had a kind and loving God in my life till now. And I discovered that I can do all kinds of things that I don't think I was supposed to be able to do, or that I certainly didn't think I could do. Now I can do them. Because I have changed, this is what's known as a spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience, a personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism, right? That's what Silkworth called a psychic change. And honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, those are the hows of this program. And we saw Gerald Mose, man, this guy, he stopped drinking, right? But if we don't change, our book tells us if we don't change, we're going to drink again. And it might be 3 days, it might be 3 weeks, it might be 3 years, or in the case of the guy in the book, 25 years, or Gerald Mose, 30 years. But if we don't change, we're going to drink, and when we drink, we're probably going to die, certainly earlier. Part 2 of Step 12, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics. Some of the way that we can do this, how do we help others? By going to meetings and sharing, by being a delegate, by going to hospitals, prisons, by reading a book, by staying sober ourselves, by speaking at a meeting, by taking action. These are all tools that help us. But I think the way that we help others is by the sharing of our stories and by showing other people that they are not so very different from the rest of us, right? That they might start to take the actions that they don't believe in and that they don't think will work. That was me, man. I didn't think these steps were going to work, and I didn't believe in them. I thought they were absolute nonsense. But I finally, reached a point where I saw that you guys were like me, and it had worked for you, and I decided, what the hell, I'm going to give it a try. And Clancy says that one of the great benefits of when you're helping somebody else is you're thinking about that poor son of a bitch instead of this poor son of a bitch, as I'm pointing to myself, right? So we get out of our heads. People, they come to these rooms, and I was certainly one of them. I look for the differences between me and you. You hear people talk about how people die from terminal uniqueness. I look for the differences because when I found the differences between me and you, that gave me an excuse that I could go out and I could get drunk. There's an old adage: give a man to fish and he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish and he eats for a lifetime. People come to AA and they want us to give them a fish to eat, and they get really pissed off when all we do is give them fishing lessons, right? That's what our job is. So when people come into these rooms, we greet them. We've got to greet all newcomers. We've got to give them the spirit of hope, right? And particularly this is true at First Step meetings. When I go to a First Step meeting, I don't want to hear any long, drawn-out drunkalogue. I want to hear a spirit of hope, right? Because I want these people to come back. So I think our job, when people come into these rooms, help them identify, and then we got to help them believe that this can work for them. We got to help them make a decision to try it. Then we take them by the hand and we walk them through the action steps. They have the spiritual awakening. Then they go to the newcomers, and then they help the newcomer to believe, to decide, and to act. The only thing we can't do is make people willing. The way people get willing is by drinking lots of whiskey, by ending up in jail, divorce court, job loss, car wrecks, DWIs, and homeless and such. That's unfortunately, that's the only way we become willing. I talked about this last week, 6 things to look for in a sponsor. Sober, done the work, has sponsor, will tell you the truth when it hurts. They're active in service work because service work is an attitude of gratitude, and gratitude is action, and that they like to have fun. Man, you got to have somebody that likes to have fun. Part 3 of the 12th step is to practice these principles in all our affairs. So what we do, our book tells us that we got to go back out into the world and be an example to other people, right? Now, if all you do is stay in AA, at meetings, how can people in the world see you? We've got to go back out into the world and show people, what has happened to us, and be an example to them. So we're gonna skip around a little bit in the book. So AA is about actions, right? It's the way we behave on the outside. And funny enough, I've said this before, but all other therapies in the world, they tell us that you've got to change the way you think, right? Then you get to change the way you act. But we here in AA, because we're backwards, we change the way we act first. And once we change the way we act, our thinking follows, right? So we're a little bit backwards from other people. So let's go to page 186. And this is still a little bit on step 12. We're going to go to page 186. And there's 4 questions that Bill and Bob asked the AA number 3. Okay, so page 186, at the top of the page, go down 1, 2, 3. Okay, on the 4th line, at the end of the 4th line, just underline, do you want to quit drinking? And put a 1 next to it. That's the first question that they asked Bill Dotson, okay, when they're 12-stepping him. Now we're going to go down to the second paragraph, and we're going to underline 4 lines. The next thing they wanted to know was if I thought I could quit of my own accord without any help, if I could just walk out of the hospital and never take another drink. That's the second question. Now these are tools that we can use when we're working with somebody. So now let's go down, after another drink, go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. And it says the next thing they wanted to know was if I believed in a higher power. Okay, so put a 3 next to that. That's their third question. Now this guy had no trouble, right? But other people might have trouble. And if somebody says, I'll work with you, but I don't want any of that God business, I usually say that's okay. What we're going to do is we're just going to go through the book. I want you to have an open mind, and we're going to see what happens. I'm not going to make you go to church. I'm not going to make you get down on your knees or do anything you don't want to do. And then we're going to go down to, let's see here, from believed in a higher power, 1, 2, 3 lines. Next, they wanted to know, would I be willing to go to this higher power and ask for help calmly and without reservations? And put a 4 next to that. So these are just 4 questions that and we don't have the time today to go through each one, but mark them in your book, because when you go out to people, these are 4 questions that you can ask them that'll help them, right? I had a guy today, man, this tile setter, and I'd known him over the years a little bit, but I haven't seen him for maybe 4 years. And I've seen him like 3 or 4 times in the last week. And he was just kind of sitting right, because I got my little computer station. He was just sitting there, right? And for about 10 minutes, and I finished up and I walked over and I just said hi to him. And out of the blue, he said, "How long have you been sober?" And I said, I've been sober about coming up on 6 years now. And he goes, "Oh, I thought it was longer." I go, "Well, I relapsed and I got addicted to gambling, and then I was addicted to the pills, so I don't consider that sober." And we were talking for a while, and I didn't know this, but, the fella said, "Well, I got a real problem with drinking." And he said, "My girlfriend is a raging alcoholic too." And he said, "But I don't drink every day. I have no problem not drinking every day, so I'm not sure if I'm an alcoholic." He said, "The problem is when I start drinking, I go crazy." And I go, "Well, that's called the allergy. Once we start to drink, we can't control what we take." And I looked him square in the eye and I said, "I bet that if you tried to quit drinking for a year, I bet you couldn't do it. Because I bet from time to time, your brain is going to tell you that it's okay to take that first drink." And he kind of looked at me with a stunned expression. I said, "That's the obsession." I said, "You don't have to drink every day to be an alcoholic." And then I ran out to my car, and he said his girlfriend wants to stop too, so I grabbed him a Code Blue flyer, and I said, "You get online and you listen to the doctor's opinion, and if that interests you, call me and get signed up for Code Blue." So who knows? I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's just one of those weird things that happens. I mean, that's why I don't hide the fact that I'm a recovered alcoholic. I don't hide that from anybody. Our book talks about our emotional insecurity, and I know when I'm feeling these things, I know something's wrong. Emotional insecurity is when you feel worry, anger, self-pity, and depression. Right? And and whenever I start to feel those things, what part of this, I must have stopped taking some of these actions, right? And then I really got to get back to my prayers in the morning. I got to get back to helping other people. I got to get back to trying to do the next right thing. One thing and all of the stuff that I teach in Code Blue obviously came from other people. I mean, everything that I talk about, except my personal experience, I got from somebody else, right? And they say that you never hear anything original in AA because it's all been said before, and I believe that's true. I got this from Clancy, and I just love it. 5 things that we do. The first one is to be quiet. Right? When we come into these meetings or we're listening to somebody, we got to be quiet. We got to shut up, and try to calm our mind. The second thing we got to do is listen. We got to listen to other people, and I know for me that was so hard when I first came in here. The third thing we've got to do is we've got to remember what they said. That's why I've got about 50 notebooks with stuff, because I hear something I love, I write it down as quickly as I can, or I'll forget it. So we be quiet, we listen, we remember, and if they gave us some practical things that we can do, we practice them. So we quiet, we listen, we remember, we practice them, and then if they're working in our lives, we teach others. We teach others what we have learned, right? And people say you can't teach the steps. I say nonsense. Of course you can teach the steps. People taught them to me, and I try to teach them to others, right? And again, if we don't apply these steps to our lives and we don't change, I firmly believe that if you're a real alcoholic, you're going to drink again. One of the other things, because I remember when I was about a couple days before I was going to give my second fifth step to somebody, I remembered something I had done in a blackout, and I thought that this thing was so horrible that it was over. It's over, man. I might as God's not going to help. This is just there's no way, there's not a place for me in AA because I did this thing. And when I talked with my sponsor about it, he kind of laughed about it and told things that he did along the same lines that were much worse. And he explained to me that we can never make a mistake so ugly that God can't turn it into something magnificent. right? Because we go out and we share the worst things we've ever done with other people. We share our stories, and they can see that they're like us and that they can get better. So really quickly, we're going to go to page 124. Page 124. And I'm going to just quickly read the first full paragraph. On page 124, Henry Ford once made a wise remark to the effect that experience is the thing of supreme value in life. That is true only if one is willing to turn the past to good account. We grow by our willingness to face and rectify errors and convert them into assets. The alcoholic's past thus becomes the principal asset of the family, and frequently it is almost the only one. Now, when I was a practicing alcoholic, I never learned from my mistakes because I would do the same thing over and over and over and over. But when I come in and I sober up and I ask you guys and God for help and I work these steps, right? What I do is I turn the past to good account. I rectify my errors and I convert them into assets. So we're going to go, the next paragraph, we're going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. Showing others who suffer how we were given help is the very thing which makes life seem so worthwhile to us now. Cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have, the key to life and happiness for others. With it, you can avert death and misery for them. Right? And I remember when Princess Leia died not too long ago, she said that she said that talking about her defects and her mistakes, she said, number one, when she talked about them, they lost their power. But number two, when she talked about them, they became guideposts and learning for other people. So I believe she was one of us. I haven't read her book or anything, but just from her saying that, she must have been. So I think we are now going to go to A Vision for You. And I might be reading kind of fast tonight. So we are on page 151, chapter 11, A Vision for You. Now we skipped some chapters, and the only reason is because I guess the format, the way I was taught, we didn't read those. But go ahead and read them, even though ones, to wives and the family and employers, they're all very good chapters. So please read them. A Vision for You. For most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, and colorful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. It is joyous intimacy with friends and a feeling that life is good. Highlight the next two sentences. But not so with us in those last days of heavy drinking. The old pleasures were gone. Just those two lines right there. They were but memories. Never could we recapture the great moments of the past. There was an insistent yearning to enjoy life as we once did, and a heartbreaking obsession that some new miracle of control would enable us to do it. There was always one more attempt and one more failure. Right? That's the insanity of the first drink. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, underline King Alcohol, it's capitalized, next to it, right, was our God. Was our God. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, shivering denizens of his mad realm. Funny enough, I'm in a sober fantasy football league, and that's the name of one of the teams, Shivering Denizens. A guy named Jason who runs some sober housing. Shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that his loneliness settled down. It thickened, ever becoming blacker. Some of us sought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding, companionship, and approval. Momentarily we did, then would come oblivion and the awful awakening to face the hideous, highlight, 4 horsemen, terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. Just that little bit there. And then off to the right, we're going to write the biblical ones. Pestilence, war, famine, and death. Pestilence, war, famine, and death. And in the book, it's terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand. Let's highlight the next 3 lines, I guess, to the end of the page. Now and then a serious drinker being dry at the moment says, I don't miss it at all. Feel better, work better, having a better time. As ex-problem drinkers, we smile at such a sally. You can stop highlighting there. We know our friend is like a boy whistling in the dark to keep up his spirits. He fools himself. Inwardly, he would give anything to take half a dozen drinks and get away with them. He will presently try the old game again, for he isn't happy about his sobriety. And man, I would do that over and over again. You know, I would sober up, I'd get my job back, I'd start making good money again, and I'd say, man, I'm going to the gym, I feel great, work's great, everything's good, you know, but I just couldn't wait. I felt like I was doing time until I could drink again. He cannot picture life without alcohol. Highlight to the end of the paragraph, the next 4 lines. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Then he will know loneliness such as few do. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end. Okay, so next to that you can write step 1/suicide. Right? And I got to tell you, man, that was me. I can remember that last week pacing back and forth in my apartment. You know, I didn't have a job. I'm running out of money. All of my stuff got confiscated at the hospital, and I didn't know what I was trying to figure out how to kill myself. The only thing I could come up with, because I didn't have any money, I'd have to go buy a rope and go up to the top of my building, tie it to the ladder, and then do a running leap off of it, right? That's all I could think of. You know, thank God I had another idea, which was to call my sister. We have shown how we got out from under. You say, yes, I'm willing. Just underline that little bit. We have shown how we got out from under, that little statement there. You say, yes, I'm willing, but am I to be consigned to a life where I shall, underline, where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum? Just that little bit there. Like some righteous people I see. I know I must get along without liquor, but how can I? Have you a sufficient substitute? So next to where we highlighted, we have shown how we got out from under. Next to that, write, come along with us. Come along with us. Because we're going to show everybody how we did it. I know I must get along with liquor, but without liquor, but how can I? Have you a sufficient substitute? We're going to highlight the whole next paragraph and write promise next to it. Yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you. I mean, if you guys are artists, or even if you just write in a journal, or you do anything creative, or even just your regular job and your relationships, I got to tell you, man, your imagination does get fired, and you're so much better at anything that you do. You know, once we stop using the alcohol, and once we get involved with a fellowship of people, and who are trying to grow spiritually. Right? And once we work these steps. How is that to come about you? I was a vegetable before I came in here, man. How was that? I couldn't eat. When I first came into these meetings, I couldn't eat. All I could say was pass, right? For the first couple of months. How is that to come about, you ask? Where am I to find these people? You are going to meet these new friends in your own community. Near you, alcoholics are dying helplessly like people in a sinking ship. If you live in a large place, there are hundreds, high and low, rich and poor. These are future fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Among them you will make lifelong friends. You will be bound to them with new and wonderful ties, for you will escape disaster together, and you will commence, highlight the top 3 lines, commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself that others may survive and rediscover life. Just highlight that little bit. Next to that, write promise. They're going to give us a lot of promises in here. You will learn the full meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself. It may seem incredible that these men are to become happy, respected, and useful once more. How can they rise out of such misery, bad repute, and hopelessness? Underline this next 3 lines. The practical answer is that since these things have happened among us, they can happen with you. Okay, so next to that, we're going to write, we are not alone. We are not alone. I think, I certainly was, and I think most alcoholics are tortured by loneliness. I mean, we can be in a room full of people, and we can still be the loneliest people on earth. Should you wish them above all else and be willing to make use of our experience, we are sure they will come. The age of miracles is still with us. Our own recovery proves that. Our hope is that when this chip of a book is launched on the world tide of alcoholism, defeated drinkers will seize upon it to follow its suggestions. Many, we are sure, will rise to their feet and march on. They will approach still other sick ones, and fellowships of Alcoholics Anonymous may spring up in each city and hamlet, havens for those who must find a way out. In the chapter, Working with Others, you gathered an idea of how we approach and aid others to health. Suppose now that through you, several families have adopted this way of life. You will want to know more of how to proceed from that point. Perhaps the best way of treating you to a glimpse of your future will be to describe the growth of the fellowship among us. Here is a brief account. Years ago, in 1935, one of our number, okay, you can write Bill W., and then you can write Akron. One of our number made a journey to a certain western city. From a business standpoint, his trip came off badly. Had he been successful in his enterprise, he would have been set on his feet financially, underline, financially, which at the time seemed vitally important, just that little bit there. Because all of us, and that was the mistake I made. I always had to get money in my pocket or I was a worthless human being. And I never would work on my recovery. I always had to get back into selling a product and commission sales. And I just, finally, I put something above that. But his venture wound up in a lawsuit and bogged down completely. The proceeding was shot through with much hard feeling and controversy. So again, you can write Bill 6 months sober. So Bill went to Akron, right? He had been trying to work on alcoholics in New York City for 6 months and not one single success. And finally he said, I've had enough. I'm going to go make some money. And he went to Akron in order to do this. But luckily for us and him, the business thing didn't work out. Bitterly discouraged, he found himself in a strange place, discredited and almost broke. Still physically weak and sober but a few months, he saw that his predicament was dangerous. He wanted so much to talk with someone, but whom? Right? Bill didn't have anybody, man. You know, we get out of treatment or we're sober, we can go to AA. He had no place. One dismal afternoon, he paced a hotel lobby wondering how his bill was to be paid. You can write Mayflower Hotel, Akron, Mayflower Hotel. At one end of the room stood a glass-covered directory of local churches. Down the lobby, a door opened into an attractive bar. He could see the gay crowd inside. In there, he would find companionship and release. Unless he took some drinks, he might not have the courage to scrape up an acquaintance and would have a lonely weekend. So here he is, man. The business deal ended. Everybody that went there with him took off. They abandoned him. He had just a couple of bucks in his pocket. He couldn't pay his bill. He couldn't pay his train fare home. And he's looking at one end of the, he's feeling self-pity. He's sorry for himself. At one end, he looks and he sees a bar. In that bar, he sees people. They're laughing. They're singing. There's smoke. There's the tinkling of glasses. There's soft music. And he's going, oh my God, does that look good? Those are my kind of people in there, right? That's what he's thinking. Of course he couldn't drink, but why not sit hopefully at a table, a bottle of ginger ale before him? He's thinking, I'll just go in there and have a ginger ale. After all, had he not been sober 6 months now? Perhaps he could handle, say, 3 drinks. Okay, right above that, write insane thought. As big as you can and still fit it in there. So now, in one sentence, he went from a ginger ale to maybe I'll just have 3 drinks. Because if I just have 3 drinks, I'll be able to chat up a friend, I'll be able to get some money, and things will start looking up. So just handle, say, 3 drinks, no more. Fear gripped him. All right, as soon as he thought that, he knew he was on thin ice, man. He was on thin ice. Again, it was the old insidious insanity, that first drink. With a shiver, he turned away and walked down the lobby to the church directory. Music and gay chatter still floated to him from the bar. So next to where it says insanity, that first drink, you can write obsession off to the left. Obsession. Because again, his brain tried to kill him right there. His brain said, you know what, Bill, it's okay for you to go in there and have just a couple of drinks. So that obsession came back and it's trying to get him to drink, and it's trying to get him to kill him. But he walked the other way, man. But what about his responsibilities, his family? Okay, let's highlight to the end of the page. But what about his responsibilities, his family, and the men who would die because they would not know how to get well? Ah, yes, those other alcoholics. There must be many in such town. He would phone a clergyman. His sanity returned, and he thanked God. Okay, so next to that sentence or that paragraph, right, the remedy. The remedy. He's thinking about helping another alcoholic. He was on the verge of drinking. And all of a sudden he said, hey man, but if I do this, what's going to happen to all these other people that I've got to help? Right? And his sanity returned, and he remembered there to thank God. Now, there is, I think we wrote this somewhere else in the book, but there's a aahistorylover.com. You can get on there and read about a lot of these people that we write down. So, selecting a church at random from the directory, he stepped into a booth and lifted the receiver. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to contact a clergyman and find another alcoholic that he can go talk to, right? He got a hold of a fellow called Reverend Walter Tunks. So after lifted the receiver, you can write Reverend Walter Tunks, Tunks. So, as the story goes, he was down to his last, he finally got a hold of this guy after a lot of trying. And Reverend Walter Tunks gave him a name of a woman who was in the Oxford group. And her name, I suppose you could write it down, was Henrietta Seiberling. Henrietta Seiberling, and she was not an alcoholic. She was a member of the Oxford group. And, Bill called her, and she answered the phone, and Bill said, I'm a fella from New York, and I've got a possible cure for alcoholism. Do you know anybody I can talk to? If you've never heard of anything like this in your life and you got a crackpot on the phone, you would probably, what the heck, this guy's crazy, right? But Henrietta Seiberling was in the Oxford group with Dr. Bob Smith, and she had been praying for a solution to Bob Smith's drinking problem. So when Bill called her, she did not think it was strange. She thought that it was God answering her prayers. And she said, yeah, man, I got a guy that we're going to hook you up with. His call to the clergyman led him presently to a certain resident of the town who, though formerly able and respected, was then nearing the nadir. Nadir means low point. Nadir of his alcoholic despair. Okay, so let's underline the next 3 lines. It was the usual situation: home in jeopardy, wife ill, children distracted, bills in arrears, and standing damage. Right? Standard alcoholic stuff. And you can write Dr. Bob right there. Dr. Bob. He had a desperate desire to stop, but saw no way out, for he had earnestly tried many avenues of escape. Painfully aware of being somehow abnormal. So underline abnormal, and above it write obsession/allergy. So Dr. Bob knew there was something wrong with him, but he didn't know what it was. But it was the obsession/allergy. The man did not fully realize what it meant to be alcoholic. This refers to Bill's first visit with Dr. Bob. These men later became co-founders of AA. Bill's story opens the text of this book. Dr. Bob's heads the story section. Dr. Bob, when Henrietta Seiberling called him up, he said, I'm not going over there. There's no way I'm going to go over there. But Dr. Bob's wife pretty much made him agree to go. And he said, okay, man, I'm going to go over there, but I'm only going to listen for 10 minutes. Well, and he was all hungover, and he was sick, and he was in awful shape. They went into a side room out at the Seiberling estate, and they talked for hours. So we're going to highlight the next 5 lines. When our friend related his experience, the man agreed that no amount of willpower he might muster could stop his drinking for long. A spiritual experience, he conceded, was absolutely necessary, but the price seemed high upon the basis suggested. Okay, so right next to that, you can write war stories, okay, right? Because Bill is telling about his past on a 12-step call. He's not doing it in a first-step meeting where you have limited time. So in this case, the war stories are okay. Now, but the price seemed high upon the basis suggested, so Bill told him about the plan of action. And Dr. Bob, of course, was a doctor, and he said, well, there's no way on earth I'm going to go out and make amends and tell people that I'm an alcoholic, because I've lost most of my customers already. If I do that, I won't have any business left at all. He told how he lived in constant worry about those who might find out about his alcoholism. He had, of course, the familiar alcoholic obsession that few knew of his drinking. Why, he argued, should he lose the remainder of his business only to bring still more suffering to his family by foolishly admitting his plight to people from whom he made his livelihood? He would do anything, he said, but that. I mean, so next to that you can write wouldn't do 9. Or you can write no 9 step or whatever. And, I remember, I didn't think people knew about my alcoholism. I went around the country opening up stores for Tile Shop, and at 7:30 I would start drinking my Windsor, and I'd have probably a pint and a half down by 9 o'clock, and I thought that I ate enough peanuts nobody could smell my... Nobody know I'm drinking, right? I ate my peanuts. But of course everybody knew about my drinking. Being intrigued, however, he invited our friend to his home. Sometime later, and just as he thought he was getting control of his liquor situation, he went on a roaring bender. Okay, so they'd been working together, and then Bob went on a roaring bender. For him, this was the spree that ended all sprees. He saw that he would have to face his problems squarely, that God might give him mastery. And I talked about that when we did step 9. Bob, they worked together for 2 weeks, and then, Bob said, I've got to go to this medical convention in Atlantic City. And Bob's wife said, Bill, don't let him go. Don't let him go. He's going to get drunk. Don't let him go. And Bill said, we got to learn how to stand on our own 2 feet. And sure enough, Dr. Bob went, and he went on a 2 or 3 day blackout. And he came back in the middle of the night. They had to carry him off the train, and he couldn't even call his wife. He called his nurse, and the nurse called his wife, and Bill said, come get him, man, he's drunk. They went and picked him up, and the nurse said, man, he's got to do surgery in the morning. And, they took him home, and they coffeed him, they walked him, they coffeed him, and he, in the morning, he looked at Bill, and he said, I'm going to go through with it. And Bill thought he was talking about surgery, but he was talking about the rest of the steps. So, Bill took him to the hospital and fed him some beer so that he could steady his nerves. He did the surgery. It came off okay. But Dr. Bob disappeared, and Bill thought, my God, he had 2 beers, now he's out drinking. But Dr. Bob showed up at 12 o'clock midnight, stone cold sober. And Bill was like, where the hell have you been? He said, I've been going up and down the street making amends to those people that I've harmed through my drinking. So Bob knew that he had better do steps 9 or he was going to drink again, right? So one morning he took the bull by the horns and set out to tell those he feared what his trouble had been. He found himself surprisingly well received and learned that many knew of his drinking. Underlined to the end of the paragraph, stepping into his car, he made the rounds of people he had hurt. He trembled as he went about, for this might mean ruin, particular to a person in his line of business. Next to that, write step 9, and you can write June 10th, 1935. Right? The day that Dr. Bob screwed up enough courage to go out and make his amends is the last day that he ever took a drink. Right? And doggone it, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for us. At midnight, he came home exhausted but very happy. He has not had a drink since. As we shall see, he now means a great deal to his community, and the major liabilities of 30 years of hard drinking have been repaired in 4. But life was not easy for the 2 friends. Plenty of difficulties presented themselves. Both saw that they must keep spiritually active, and underline keep spiritually active.